to attract the interest of people who otherwise could dismiss it as vandalism. So it varied from that to sort of more, direct actions of sort of super gluing or paint bombing, that sort of stuff. I mean, we never got into any sort of arson. Stop the City events of the early 80s, I suppose, were the most extreme manifestation of that, in the sense that they were a sort of mixture of part festival, part riot. Well, the idea was to close down the city, and I can't remember, there's 2 days in the year when certain figures are shifted in the city from one institution to another. It's when they, decide on the currency, all that sort of shit. Anyway, basically speaking, if you put the city out of operation on those days, then, you're really fucking up their entire modus operandi, like the banks and shipping agencies and that sort of stuff. From sort of smoke bombs in the underground, which completely has to stop the undergrounds, to, banks were having their windows smashed in, streets were blocked, phones were blocked. I mean, the place became inoperable for a day. I believe, that it set a pattern. I mean, certainly Reclaim the Streets came out of the Stop the City movement, and, inevitably, I think that, and the Stop the City thing actually did spread right across the globe. I mean, it started happening in Australia, America, I don't know whether it happened in Europe at all, but certainly modelled on the London ones, it was repeated in Australia and America, and I don't think that Seattle would have happened in the same way.
How does it feel? How does it feel to be the mother of a thousand dead? How does it feel to be the mother of a thousand dead? Your ambitions got these big bodies of life. You're the sick fool, then the people from the back and back. You're not persuading people to accept the life given up. You're thinking right to excuse. To the pain, you started a process that was so bad and fine. You're eating that destruction from your life, the pain that you're inflicting. You determined to create the environment.
We released a record called How Does It Feel to Be the Mother of a Thousand Dead? And writing for one of the daily newspapers here was a guy who did the music bit in it, or the pop bit. Prick. And his brother was a Conservative politician in Enfield. So he says to his brother, look, what this band called Crass have done, they've written about how does it feel to be the mother, so the politician gets the arsehole, says how outrageous the record is and it's disgusting. Then we found, of course, then there was a circular, a memo passed around the House of Parliament in the Tory party saying on no account must any member of the Conservative Party have anything whatsoever to do with a band known as the name of Crass. The opposition Labour government heard about it. We then started receiving letters of support from the Labour MPs, and then a Labour MP actually mentioned it in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's question time. Has the Prime Minister listened to the latest record? How does it feel to be the mother of a thousand dead?
Thatcher needed something to boost her public face. She was failing miserably on her agenda, on her internal agenda, and needed something to boost her popularity. I mean, it was very jingoistic, and she did do. How the fucking hell did, Bush managed to, gain credibility through going into Iraq? Well, he has done, despite the fact that and how has Blair remained in power after supporting the invasion of Iraq? But they do because people are essentially jingoistic. Look at a football match. You'll see one tonight and see how jingoistic. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's guns or footballs, When the men are out, they're out, aren't they? It's very difficult, for a country in a state of war to actually dare to say, I object, you know, because, I mean, we were accused of being traitors, you know, both in the national media and by people down in pubs and that sort of shit. We put together a conversation between Thatcher and Reagan, which was edited out of actual speeches. And the basis of the conversation was basically Reagan questioning Thatcher about the sinking of the Belgrano. We had had classified information from the Falklands. We knew a sailor who used to be a skinhead, and he was heading out to the Falklands. And then he contacted us somehow or other as he was returning and just spewed out all this information about the sinking of the Belgrano and the sinking of the Sheffield. The sinking of the Sheffield was something that still hasn't really come to light. I think it was 4 ships. It was one of the big flagships that actually Prince Andrew or Prince Edward, that one of the royal sons was on board. So obviously they had to ensure that that wasn't going to get whacked. The naval response was to order that 3 of the 4 ships should send up flak, you know, which is silver foil, which diverts missiles. Yeah. And the other one wasn't informed, the Sheffield. So it guaranteed that when the missiles arrived, they would go for the one which wasn't protected by a foil shield, which it did. So the Sheffield was sunk. And the men knew that, you know, and there was almost a mutiny, which is why the boats took so long coming back, because they had to sort that out. Pete took the tapes out to mainland Europe, sent it to all the major newspapers in mainland Europe, and then we heard nothing. And then the next thing we heard was a report in some American, I think it was a San Francisco paper, about KGB tapes, Pentagon exposing KGB tapes, and we recognised them as being our tape. You know, and then it became a really big story in the American press about, you know, KGB. These are the methods used, you know, to what will lead to the Third World War. And anyway, this guy rang up, this reporter, and said, "Do you know anything about these tapes?" And I picked up the phone. I said, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." He said, "Well, I think you do, and I want to come out and talk to you about it." So I said, "Well, look, if we were to admit it, would you be prepared to print all the information that's given on the tapes about the Sheffield and the Belgrano?" And he said, "Yes, I could do that." And they did do it, you know. So we managed to get, you know, this sort of really, you know, top secret classified information about the Belgrano and the Sheffield into the national, you know, the good quality press. It had no effect at all whatsoever. Except this sort of huge interest in us all of a sudden, and you know, and at that point the KGB actually did get in touch with us under the guise of being a literary magazine, and invited us up to their offices in West London, you know, which was obviously a complete sham, and it quite obviously was KGB, and basically they were seeing whether we were worth recruiting. And from that point on, it just became fucking stupid, because we were no longer commentators and activists. You know, we'd become sort of